Hi, this is Shruthi Darbhamulla. Welcome to this week's episode of the Hindu Parlay podcast. Recently, the Ministry of Education announced that an AI curriculum would be introduced from class 3 onwards for the next academic year, 2026 to 27. The government also launched the Skilling for Intelligence Readiness or SOAR initiative, where thousands of CBSE schools would offer AI as a skill subject starting from 6th standard onwards. This initiative was introduced in July 2025. So, our discussion today centers on this core question: should AI be introduced as part of school curricula, and what could the potential impact of that be? So, joining us today to provide their insights are Aparajita Bharti, a founding partner of the public policy firm The Quantum Hub, and the co founder of Young Leaders for Active Citizenship. She focuses on tech policy as well as policy related to youth and gender. Our other speaker is Viplav Bakshi, the founder of AmplifyU, a platform that leverages AI to aid teachers create content, and also the founder of Edulist AI, which works in the higher ed and tech space. So, welcome to you both, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll start with the theory itself, the idea itself. The Ministry of Education is proposing to introduce AI as a skill subject starting from third standard, and there's already an initiative starting from sixth standard. So, what do you think about the proposal to introduce this as a foundational subject from such a young age?
Sure. So I think, Shruti, it's an interesting announcement. I don't think we have too many details right now on, what exactly the curriculum will have. But, we have reviewed internally at TQH what is the curriculum from sixth grade onwards. I think when we are discussing how AI is getting integrated into education when it's offered as a course, I think people are often talking very loosely about it, right? AI can be an enabler for schools and teachers. I think the kind of tools that Viplav is developing is, more focused on that. Or AI can be used by students to take help from it and sometimes also use it to do their assignments, etc. And I think when it comes to AI literacy, we have to basically make a distinction between, when we talk about AI education, we have to make a distinction between AI literacy and AI skills, right? So AI literacy is actually the ability to understand how AI works, to have critical thinking when it comes to AI responses, to have an idea that, AI, what can you use it for, what you shouldn't use it for, and if you're using AI, how do you critically evaluate what it's producing? AI skills is actually having the skill to develop AI tools, AI products, or be somewhere in the AI value chain, which could be right from the data sort of preparation stage to cybersecurity. So there's an entire AI value chain, and there are different skills that are required if you want to be a part of the AI value chain. So I think it is not very clear right now that what will be focusing on in grade 3 or even in any other grade. What we have reviewed that in grade 6, for example, the focus is on AI literacy as of now. The curriculum is sort of talking about what can AI be used for, how do you critically evaluate what AI is producing, and also give students an understanding of how is AI built, what kind of data does it use. But if you look at 11th and 12th grade, it is looking at AI skills. They are talking about Python programming, they are talking about natural language processing, and that is a hardcore skill that students can develop and then enter STEM careers. So I think we need to be clear about what does AI education mean. And my sense is if it is being introduced in third grade, it should be something around along the lines of AI literacy, because I think with third grade, especially, I think the focus has to be on basic numeracy, literacy, language and critical thinking skills, because you need those critical thinking skills even more now with AI, because you have to check somebody who's already quite intelligent, right? So I think that is where the focus should be.
These are great points, I think, Aparita. I think technology as a curriculum has been sort of fraught with problems ever since we conceptualized even ICT courses and ICT in school kind of initiative. We've seen it degrade into just a rote learning exercise where you actually even write programs by hand on a piece of paper in the examination. And we've seen issues of rote learning across subjects, of course, where computer science is no exception to the thing. Secondly, I think technology is something that is changing and morphing so rapidly that the idea of having a curriculum around it in the traditional sense is a little difficult for us to imagine as well, right? I mean, prompt engineering will probably disappear in a year's time or a couple of years' time, if not already. Also, I think to Aparajita's point, we need to understand how the curriculum will be constructed at different levels. Will third grade onwards be, in the prep stage, be around literacy, or will it be around the same fundamental skills of say sense making, pattern recognition, numeracy? We have seen the ASAR reports, and we've seen the dismal, uh, you know, um, results of how literate our students are in basic English and mathematics, for them, or language and math. And whether we should look at after that, we should look at maybe literacy, or maybe is literacy going to be so obvious to everybody or to a large population that it need not be taught. So the AI will get embedded in everything that you really do. And then, of course, in the higher grades, the decision becomes whether to use AI as a subject or as a curriculum for employability, like vocational skills, or whether it should be taught as a core subject, which is tuned towards higher education and research. Because it is a continuum, right? You got to think about school, college, work, that continuum as well to do. One of the other reasons why technology as a curriculum is really fraught with problems, and we'll come back to it later on as well, is that tech has a way of polarizing and dividing. Especially when you talk about infrastructure, connectivity. So just try and imagine having millions of children trying to figure out their first AI prompt. Do we have the infrastructure to, or even the connectivity, or do we even have, the equipment at a school level? 10% of our schools don't even have electricity. The rest may not have reliable electricity. Forget about connectivity, forget about computing infrastructure required for it. Neither are the models available in local languages. Neither is the AI so robust and so on. We're too early in that space to do. And if we don't do hands-on when we are doing tech, then what's the point of doing tech? That's an important thing. Lastly, the motivation. I think my second last point, if motivation is mitigating the job shifts, that is itself a moving target. We can't say that so many millions of jobs will be sort of displaced, and therefore you got to be ready for the new jobs and the new economy, because by the time they graduate, that picture will have moved, right? So you can't really say what it is. Plus, the bubble may really burst. People are talking about the AI bubble, AI boom, going to burst at any moment, and entrepreneurs are going to be closing down shop. But if it is R&D and if it's to make India a powerhouse, that is laudable, of course. Lastly, I have very, very serious concerns about the design and implementation at scale of any new initiative. Teachers are a very important part of this, and but teachers are not a monolithic entity. They're different. They have different needs. Schools are different. They have different environment, culture, various divides. So, design and implementation at scale is a hugely important problem, and we have not been very successful in that in the past.
So you've jumped ahead to design and implementation, but I would like to bring it back to just the young students before they go for jobs. Like, what impact would this type of curriculum have, whether it be AI literacy or introducing it as just as another technical subject? what would it have? What impact would it have on work ethic and student learning, given that there are already problems that people are observing with uh, students submitting assignments which are Chat GPT generated? So, what would you say to that?
So I think, Shruti, I think we have to study these trends over a long period of time to really, have that kind of empirical evidence of what impact it is uh, having on learning outcomes. But, as an educator, I run Young Leaders for Active Citizenship, so I'm kind of part educator and part policy person. I think what has happened is that the pace of content creation has, especially with Gen AI, see, we also have to make a distinction between AI, which has been around for very long now, and Gen AI post November 2000, was it November 2023 or whatever, post 2023, which is in everybody's hands in form of AI chatbots, etc., because that is the most recognizable form of AI that all of us have, and we're all most exposed to that. I think the after that period, the pace of content creation is so high that the pace of learning, it's almost impossible to match that. So what we are seeing with young people is, and that is not just young people in schools, etc., but if they are prompting AI is very quick to generate an answer, right? But does actually a teenager or somebody who's a school student have the ability to critically evaluate what has been uh, produced by the AI chatbot, to critically evaluate it, understand it, and to be able to replicate it? So I think there have been some studies where basically students, as soon as just after they have answered something with AI, they have been asked to replicate that and explain that in their own language, and they're failing to do so. Because obviously, the education that we all had required us to apply our own mind, put together something. So there were some connections that were formed in our brain, which helped us connect things logically. But here we've skipped that entire process in a way, right? So there is some concern that would is the incentive of learning going down as a whole, right? So there is Professor Stuart Russell from University of Berkeley. He in fact was at the inauguration of India AI Impact Summit last month, and he said that how humans deal with AI in education is the litmus test of humanity's ability to be able to regulate and handle AI's development for its own good. Because in education, actually, it's one of the most tricky use cases, because obviously AI holds a lot of promise. It can create the most customized learning plans for you than any teacher could have done, human teacher could have done. And it has relentless ability to keep on answering your questions at any time of the day, etc. But on the other hand, it is also systematically sort of taking away that incentive to learn a lot, right? So in fact, he has coined this term called diseducation, and he's worried about the fact that will we lose intergenerational learning, because until now whatever AI is doing is actually based on all the learning that humanity has had for its existence, right? It has consumed all that data, it's producing all that answers on the basis of that. But the next generation may not have the right incentives to actually push themselves to keep on learning. And what does that mean for humanity? It's an unanswered question right now.
From my perspective, I think if the fear is that by introducing AI as a formal subject, we'll be equipping students with ways to cheat, then probably we shouldn't have even introduced computer science as a subject or any technology that could help them cheat or take assistance, including probably WhatsApp and Instagram and YouTube and any other such technology that exists, or maybe even talking to each other using a mobile phone. So I don't think that is the right way to look at this. Historically, if you see, whether it was video games coming in, or it was TV or radio or the internet or in social media, or Wikipedia, for example, every time, every wave, the same concern has been there. Are we dumbing down our children? Are we reducing their ability to think creatively? okay, or critically this thing? Are we losing agency in front of other tools that are there? What if Wikipedia comes in? Will the teacher ever be required? These are things that we've been hearing for the last 3 decades or more. And whenever change happens, it's a natural reaction for us to look at, right? But the reality is that the way learning is transacted, you will need the human effort, you will need human intuition, as well as you will need ways to scale as well. For example, if there are no teachers or if there are no if they're not there's no required support on the ground for the student, they may also look at technology as one of the ways to supplement what they're doing. I don't think it this is something that is caused by AI. Unfortunately, many people seem to think that AI has come in, and that is why this is completely new phenomenon, and we are really dumbing down to. It's not like that. I think we need to adapt. Our system should adapt to every new technology wave, every new theoretical wave as well, because we moved from behaviorist and cognitivist kind of teaching methods to more constructivist teaching methods, as even our pedagogy is evolving over time. When you talk about experiential learning, action learning, so on and so forth. So our systems have to adapt to these new realities. And one of the ways we can do that is by treating technology as native to the process of education itself. By that, I mean, if there is new technology, can that new technology be employed equally by teachers and by students to improve the effectiveness of teaching and learning? This is really important. And the point I think every new technology throws up is, as you said, around the work ethic. Ethics are things that are universal, whether you have technology or not, whether you have technology A or technology B. And more than worrying about the technology, I think we should worry about how the right ethics should be created to work, to use technology in ways that's constructive. What are the ethics? What are the safeguards? What are the moral values that we have when we talk about technology? So I think we need to look at those things. Definitely, we cannot use new technology by looking at a rear view mirror. I think we should look at both the rear view mirror and the future vision that we have, and then place where we are in terms of technology, and this specifically this particular case of AI.
Speaking to one particular aspect of AI, the fact that the AI as it currently exists may hallucinate, or there have also been reports of psychological impact on children. And given that, and the sources may not be verified. So, given that, one, when would you propose to introduce such a framework, AI learning? What do you think the right stage would be to introduce something like that?
First of all, I think we sometimes think that children are only engaging with schools and whatever they are learning is from schools. That's not true. So I think they will get exposed to AI whether schools introduce them or not. I mean, Meta AI is embedded in WhatsApp, and so much homework comes through WhatsApp. Every parent is on 100 WhatsApp groups to coordinate the kind of homework. Of course, I'm talking about more well-off families right now, but basically, there is so much educational content that is just being discussed on WhatsApp. So I think whether schools introduce AI formally or not, children are getting exposed to AI. Whether it is on their parents' devices or, as they get their own devices in grade 8, 9. I mean, sometimes parents do give devices to children. So they already have that understanding. I think the question is not whether they should be introduced to AI or not. That I think is the non-question. I mean, they will get introduced to AI. It's impossible to exist in this world and not get introduced to AI right now. I think the question is that what can we, as Viplav was saying, that we can't look in the rear view mirror, right? Technologies have happened before, but they were different types. For example, when calculator came, I remember, when I was in school, I used to question my teachers that why do I need to learn math? Because now we have calculators, right? But the point of learning basic math was the ability to even understand the steps that are required. What instruction can I give the calculator, right? I don't think that foundational learning is going anywhere. The need for that foundational learning is very much going to be there. The ability to think critically, question what AI is producing is actually a very core skill. Now it's even more important because AI says things very convincingly sometimes which are not true. I mean, I was asking Chat GPT, how much do you hallucinate? And it said it depends on what questions you are asking and what model are you using. It's a very nice, honest, tool on its own. It always points out its own fallacies as well. But basically, hallucination, I mean, it may get fixed, but it is likely to remain, some percentage is likely to remain. It also depends on what kind of prompts you are giving it and what are the tasks that you are asking them. So therefore, it is even more important that the person who is using AI as a tool to whatever they are doing has the ability to understand, okay, if the AI is producing this kind of an output, how much do I need to rely on this? And should I challenge what is being produced? That is one. The second thing is because a lot of human tasks, I mean, a lot of tasks which are information based, right, are some things that are getting outsourced to AI. We cannot ignore that reality. I mean, we are already seeing that, some job displacement is happening, and every wave of technology has led to some job displacement. Therefore, human skills are becoming even more important. Empathy, for example, even when we are talking about teachers, I don't think AI is going to displace teachers. Ever since I was a child, teachers were going to get displaced first by computers, then by robots, then by now AI is the new thing. You need human connection to be able to influence a child also. AI is, yes, able to talk empathetically, and, I'll come to that. What is the psychological, end of this? But I think mentorship, role models, I don't think you are taking that away completely out of that equation. I don't think we'll reach that level anytime soon with AI, right? But I think what we do need to think about is that as children get exposed to AI, there are some other risks that come about, right? So what they're doing for education, etc., maybe we'll build frameworks around it. There are educationists and people who are thinking about pedagogy who will look at what the balance is. I think the other thing that is happening is that when students start using AI as study companions, they will often start using AI as study companions. And we did a survey, called the Youth Pulse survey with 500 students who are already using AI. I think around 88% of the school students who took that survey are already using AI as study companions. But 57% of those students have also started using it to have general conversations, right? If they are feeling stressed, if they are anxious, teenagers, I mean, adolescence is a very confusing time for all of us. So we are not just thinking about education. We are also exploring our sexuality, our getting into relationships, understanding who we are as people, making our own values at that time, building friendships. So many students and kids are also using AI to have those conversations, which they would otherwise have with their human friends, and AI bots are trained to sort of be empathetic or, respond in a way that is very self-affirming, validates your concerns. The AI chatbot is available any time of the day. So the concerns there are that, will it also impact human skills, which is an unintended consequence of this technology, right? Possibly because children sometimes, like in our survey, 40% students also said that some of the things that they have been sharing with AI chatbots are things they would have otherwise shared with a human in their life, right? So that is, I think, something that we need to think about. And there we do need some guardrails around design of chatbots when children are interacting with them, right? And I think AI companies themselves, whether it is Google, Meta, OpenAI, are aware of this risk. And I think there have been already some cases in the US where, parents have taken these companies to court as well, that some guardrails need to be there. Just as we have brought some guardrails into social media as well, there needs to be safety by design when you are designing AI chatbots that are available to children. Also, there are laws such as the privacy laws. There is the IT Act 2000 in India. So they have obligations on platforms and intermediaries. There are restrictions on what you can do with children's data, what you can't do. So all of that also apply to these companies. So there is a larger ecosystem beyond education also, is what I mean, which also has to come around and build safety into this whole ecosystem.
Everybody is vulnerable to AI today. Gen AI is a couple of years old. AI has been there for the past 30 years, but or more. But Gen AI as a phenomenon, as a commercial phenomenon, as a scaled up phenomenon, has been available to us only in the past couple of years. Everybody is vulnerable to Gen AI as it exists today. And it's again nothing new. Can we trust content on the internet, on TV, and with apologies in the news media as well? And we have had the dark web for quite some time. We have had cyber fraud, online crime, data privacy issues, as Aparajita said. Misinformation, malpractice, crime did exist without generative AI as well. It will continue to exist, and everybody is vulnerable to them. Young students, people with the disadvantages, social disadvantages, economic disadvantages are more vulnerable than others. People with information asymmetries are more vulnerable than others, and therefore literacy is a hugely important thing to do. But it's equally important to understand that today we are doing a disservice to students by giving them chatbots when the underlying technology is not proven, when the underlying data is biased, and it is not tested, or any amount of guardrails can't really help you. And here we are allowing even teachers to create bots for their students when teachers themselves are not trained on what guardrailing means. For example, how does having a closed set of content that students can only interact with to be verified and authentic, those kind of things. This is absolutely this craze is letting us create many more bad impacts than we should be doing responsibly at this stage. We need to build more of a structure around safe and responsible use of AI. We need to enable teachers first to be able to understand and responsibly use AI for their own work, for their own interpretation.
So you mentioned teachers, that is a key factor in most children's education. That's a pivotal figure. So you mentioned training teachers better. So can you speak a little more as to what kind of training teachers would require to implement such a curriculum? And when Ms. Bharti, you mentioned human skills. So how can that also be included in a curriculum such as this? If you can speak a little to that.
Firstly, you have to understand that teachers are not a monolithic entity. There's no one single teacher, right? There's no one single learner. Every teacher is also unique. They have their own styles. They have their own preferences. They have their own motivations, and they have their own skills and prior knowledge. And therefore, and they're also culturally situated in different contexts, use different languages, face different inimical work conditions. So we are in a smorgasbord of styles and constraints, and we can't think that one approach will fit everybody. But historically, what has been seen with activity-based learning, with CCE, with open text-based assessments, OTBAs, and in India and other movements across the world, we have seen that one-shot training doesn't work. It just becomes like a tick mark, like a checkbox saying, okay, yeah, we trained somebody, right? Or I got a certificate on AI readiness, and that's I'm ready with that. Like in other subjects, like in STEM, like in CC, like in OTBA, etc., we need to ensure that there's continuous coaching of teachers. Also, because the technology is moving too fast, right? So how do you get that across? And imagine doing that at scale. I mean, if it was the three of us and we're talking about AI preparation, and say let's three of us were teachers, it's easy, right? We belong to a specific kind of background profile, English speaking, urban, educated in a certain type of school. So we will understand things in a particular way. We are exposed to technology in many much ways, but maybe somebody at a remote area, or even at a disadvantaged sector in a particular city, could be facing a huge divide, and they may know of different ways or different cultures of using that technology. So teachers are not monolithic now, and one-shot interventions are not going to help. These are two big learning points. In fact, I asked AI to create a small poem around it, and it says, "They spoke of AI, of futures so bright, of coding and ethics and robots at night. But down in the valley where children still sat, they shared one blackboard and one old mat." So you see that there is a whole diversity that's there that needs to be addressed. We have failed spectacularly trying to make blanket statement that we'll train teachers. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked so far. And look at the schools, how different they are. So single teacher schools, about 9%. 35% of our schools, and this might amaze you, are less than 50 students and 2 teachers. Half the teachers don't have proper qualifications. There's a large contingent of para teachers. The schools don't have connectivity, electricity, and therefore, as a result, how would you design content for somebody who doesn't have electricity or who doesn't have computing? Right? How would you design that curriculum? It will have to be an unplugged, non-technological curriculum to be created for such, areas. Right? So you'll have to think about how at scale this will happen, because ultimately it will have a direct impact on the outcome we want, which is to make India an AI superpower or powerhouse with a lot of research and development happening, phenomenal use, great adaptation to new kinds of jobs and all that. So really, it's this. I'm very worried, as I said at the outset, at sweeping statements that we will introduce anything to any segment at scale within the next few months and assume that it will work. It won't.
I think I agree with everything that Viplav has said. I think the digital divide is very real. And I think with AI, it can become even deeper, right? That digital divide can become even deeper. It can lead to deepening of inequalities in society. And that is a huge problem as, more and more sort of tech is developing. And if we don't fix the other inequities that exist in society, I think teaching load is actually becoming even higher with AI. So my mother actually, is a math teacher in a government school. She's just retired. But because AI, kids already have access to generative AI. They're already using it to submit assignments, figure out, they are also learning from AI. But whether somebody has learned something or not, your normal testing mechanisms are not being able to figure out the way they were being able to figure out earlier. So paper and pen, you can still do, okay, if you, for example, you're able to control for cheating. So paper and pen without any help, yes, you can evaluate if somebody is understood or not. But for example, in very well-resourced schools where they had already moved to computer assignments, the teacher actually, they are struggling. So what they are doing is they are now having to do Viva also to understand whether the child is able to actually explain what they have written. So imagine the amount of teaching time that will go in doing Vivas versus what they could have evaluated on the basis of written test. So there is, depending on the context, AI is having a very different impact on different types of schools, different types of teaching ecosystems. The same thing, for example, in universities is a big problem because everybody had already moved to computer assignments. But even if you have AI detection tools, they are giving false positives. Sometimes they are not being able to detect whether AI is being used or not. So how do you evaluate if somebody has actually learned something unless you talk to them and ask them to actually replicate what they have done in real time, right? So there are these new issues that are coming when it comes to evaluation of students, etc. And even in recruitment, we are seeing some of these issues, right? My own organization has moved to video-based interviews for one thing which was used to be a written test, right? So that we are able to understand whether the candidate is able to think for themselves. So I think it is disruptive at many levels, but it also is very contextual. So for example, in a low resource environment where the teacher themselves do not have sometimes critical skills to be able to evaluate something that, for example, general purpose AI is producing, how would they, teach the students to be able to evaluate critically? So their students are even more vulnerable than the teachers who are more technically savvy, right? And so imagine that the kind of inequity that is going to create, because everybody is having very different educational experiences. So I absolutely agree with Viplav. Teachers are not a monolith. Even within, for example, Delhi, I live in Delhi, there are different kind of schools. Every school is having a different challenge when it comes to AI. They are not same. Delhi government schools, for example, are very different. They have a different challenge. Schools which are very well resourced have a different challenge. So we have to look at the context in which AI is also getting used to understand where do teachers need the most amount of handholding.
I agree. I think we just finished doing a report on how teachers use AI. We asked about 500 teachers what their preferences are and what their experiences with AI. More than 80% of them say that prompt engineering is a new third degree, I mean, pun intended, a third degree for them, because getting AI to respond to their comments and their instructions is a really, really difficult task. And therefore, they actually say that we need multiple iterations. And even if we do multiple iterations, the relevance and the accuracy of content that's generated is not there, because it doesn't understand the national education policy. It doesn't understand Bloom's taxonomy, unless it's explicitly told to understand or apply Bloom's taxonomy, for example. So teachers are facing a double whammy. They are looking at trying to save time, but the number of iterations because of these problems, even things like handling language, or the problem of having too many tools, or even the fact that in most of these chat tools you can't really edit content. You give it instruction, it'll give you back some text. What do you do with it? You can't engage with parts of that text. You got to regenerate that text, and then things change. So teachers have been sort of really, really at the raw end, receiving end of this kind of development. To your other point on assessments and Viva and things like that, I've heard this across school and college. But I think also it makes us really introspect on whether the existing systems were really robust. In written exams, in project work in schools, I've seen parents, I've seen students, and others simply just copy off somebody else to do their work and submit it and then grade it and all that stuff. So that's been happening for a long time. It's just that it becomes easier now.
So I think we also have to look at teachers as innovators, because they are the ones who are in the classroom and they are innovating with the technology and as they go along. So I think, some teachers, for example, I have heard what they have been doing is they have been asking their students to critically evaluate AI responses to questions across chatbots, right? Like at the university level. So you give the same prompt to, say, Perplexity, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and then you critically evaluate and see what that is. So that is building a critical thinking skill. So I think to your question about what human skills do we need to build and how do we do it, I think then we have to think about how do we use AI as a teaching tool as well. And of course, as you enter the workforce, you will have AI tools, right? So whatever work that you will do will be a value add over and above whatever the AI bots are able to do. So while that may keep changing, and I agree with Viplav, that is a shifting goalpost, with every 6-8 months. But if you teach essentially the people the ability to think, the ability to work with other people, the ability to organize different resources and, produce value, and to be able to upskill themselves across their entire life, I think that's what we need to focus on. Because the main thing that you need to learn from education is the ability to continue learning, right? All of us, we have studied something, we are doing something in our work. Sometimes it relates to that, sometimes it doesn't. And the ability to learn and continuously innovate is something that is inherent to humans. And I think that is the skill that we really need to focus on in building in this generation that is in school right now.
Yeah, and one of the perspectives is that, national education policy talks about interdisciplinary nature of connecting STEM together, connecting different subjects together, and doing experiential learning and so on and so forth. And they're building creative thinking, critical thinking, collaboration skills. They're building, all the core skills required in math and science, and even in social science, for example, ethics, or patterning, reasoning, ethical judgment, decision making, privacy, etc. So they're already preparing kids for a AI world. Do we necessarily need to make AI a subject? That could be another way of looking at it as well. Because the moment you make something a subject, you say, okay, so many hours in the day or so many hours in the week, 30 minutes, this is the textbook that will happen. There'll be 10 publishers coming in and jumping in and saying, we've got a new AI textbook, which is the best textbook in the world. Then you've got a guide market that's coming in. Then you've got podcasts coming in and solving those questions that are given in the books given. So there's a huge market that is being created for it as well, right? But aren't we actually supposed to be doing that in any case?
And also, just one last point, in the national education policy, there was something called the National Education Technology Forum, which is supposed to be a think tank, which looks at technology development and then advises the government on how curriculum needs to be updated. Now, if you go to the website today, it has a pop-up for some comments that they had invited in 2023. Okay, so I don't know how active that think tank is. But I completely agree with Viplav. I think teachers need to be given some guidance on what needs to be done with this wave. And there has to be a body like that, whether that or something like that, which is thinking critically about how we are coexisting with AI in our education system, and whether AI as a skill or a subject needs to be introduced, or does it need to be a horizontal where it is being used as an enabler for education, and also share best practices with teachers so that they can start applying, because the technology is moving too fast. So you are just leaving them in a lurch right now and, cope with it. So, and by making a subject, you'll only train a few teachers on that subject. But what is actually happening is that it's a general purpose technology. It's already in everybody's hand by default. So you have to teach almost everyone how to kind of, utilize AI in whatever they are doing, including teaching.
It's a really important point. Think about it. When you're specializing, you are going to specialize either vertically or horizontally. Vertically means within AI, you will go build hardware, you'll build software, you'll build models and stuff like that, and core AI kind of work that you will start doing at some point of time. Horizontally means that whether it's sciences, engineering, medicine, any other domain, healthcare, whatever, you will need to have AI built into those fields, from automation to discovery to monitoring and whatever. So you need to look at both the horizontal and vertical integration of AI in the curriculum, and it's best served by the horizontal integration is best served by embedding AI in every subject.
As you mentioned, there's changing goalposts in the world. There's differing rates of digital literacy, and no curriculum is perfect or designed for every child. So, just briefly as a thought experiment, if you were supposed to introduce a child to this, how would you go about it?
I think, Shruti, I actually asked ChatGPT also what do they think that they should be doing, and then of course I applied my own critical lens to it. So I think till age 12, foundational learning is very important. It's okay if nobody has any exposure to AI till age 12, right? There's anyway so much, I think, thinking around this across the world, that how much should children be exposed to, tech devices of their own, how much agency should they have, unsupervised use of technology should they have till age 12. So usually I think across the world, there's this understanding that a lot of parental supervision is required till that age. And I think that is a very critical period to build critical thinking skills, basic alphanumeric literacy, and I think we should definitely double down on that. I think middle school, we should definitely think about AI literacy. What are AI applications? How can AI, where all AI is being used? What are its own limitations? What kind of data does it use? What are the different kinds of, AI models? Like, there's natural learning, language processing. There's different kind of training models as well. So I think that knowledge also will build critical thinking skills in students, because they need to understand that AI can be developed in different ways. And then I think from I think 8, and in parallel, I think because many schools already introduced tech based learning now from middle school, so you have to, it's okay to have like AI, for example, tools to help children make their own personalized learning plans, or teachers need to be trained, and teachers can be trained from grade 1 only, I mean, or nursery. It's a very powerful tool to help build lesson plans, because it builds very creative lesson plans, so teachers can use that. But when it comes to children's exposure, I think 6 to 8 should focus more on AI literacy, and then using AI based assignments as well to build that critical thinking around AI. And then ninth to 12th grade, of course, if you want to be somebody who wants to participate in the AI workforce, at some point, I think maybe those skills can also be introduced in those grades. That's what I think. Of course, I'm thinking about schools right now with no limitation of economic resources, etc. So, of course, in India, that diversity has to be taken into account as well.
Yeah, I think students are also not monolithic, just like teachers are not monolithic, right? So they'll have their different constraints and context from which they come. But I would largely agree that I would push that in the primary segment up to grade 5, at least there is more emphasis on math and science and humanities, English, language, in the core subjects. As usual, this is just common sense. These are all things that are going to be used in understanding and comprehending any technology or any other discipline as well. So I think we are facing much bigger challenges of literacy and numeracy in India and maybe across the world. I see the same things happening in Australia, or same complaint from, say, an Australian curriculum. It says our kids don't know how to do math at the grade level or English at the grade level. So we are battling some very important, pressing, urgent challenges in the primary education space. Let's focus on making that very much more robust. Whatever needs to be added on as part of a subject can be added on to help kids orient themselves better to AI. For example, they should be careful that if they have access to devices, they don't get they're not so vulnerable. So there are guardrails for them, or there are ways to inform them and make them more literate. 6 to 8, I definitely agree with the Aparajita that this is more a user or a literacy or a skill kind of a area where they learn to be proficient with the tools. And 9 to 12 should be really either vocational skills or hardcore AI as a subject. And this will impact the university education as well, because we start from scratch when we get to first year.
All right. Thank you so much. This was a very interesting conversation. Thank you for joining us today.